I'm glad to have Sophie and Susan joining me today to discuss this very weighty and controversial topic in fueling. And maybe to start you off or to set the stage, Sophie, I think this is a question that is asked a lot in the fueling circles. Today we'll do a lot of myth busting. So is climate change real?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It depends on who you're asking and who's responding. I think there are people who give their pros and cons. Yeah. I'm from a company that is very active in this space, so from where we stand, it is real. Yeah. And I don't think any of us can deny that we have seen climate changing. The weather has changed over time, both in Nairobi, in Kiambu, even where you come from. We actually realize the rainy seasons are different, the sunny periods are different. And what can we attribute that to? When science puts evidence in front of us that the cause of this is due to climate change, is due to greenhouse gas emissions, and they're actually able to tie the two, it's very hard for you to dispute it. The problem is a lot of us in the industries, in the areas where we make our money, they rely on methods that result in greenhouse gas emissions. So it's very challenging when you're being pressured that you need to adapt, you need to change from the way you're currently producing so that you can reduce the impact of climate change. And yet to do that requires you to make a larger investment than you have available to you. So when you're pushed to the wall, you start challenging what is pushing you to the wall. So that is why sometimes you find people negating and saying climate change is not real and push for status quo to remain.
Thank you. Susan, why should we care?
So thank you, Jesse, for that. And just to pick up from where Sophie ended, asking, is it real? One, we should care because we are all impacted, whether we are in a sector that is seen to be a higher polluter than the other. The fact that as consumers, we are the ones, in a sense, contributing through our consumption, I guess we should all care. And in particular for the fueling industry, while we do contribute to other sustainable development goals positively, the question of sustainability is making sure that we reduce, if not eliminate, the negative impacts of climate change. So I believe we should care because every individual, whether it is ourselves, our children, the future generations, they are going to be affected. Where I come from, when I was very young, we used to eat one potato. It was enough to feed one person. Today, you need at least 4 or 5 to feed, one person. So it's real, and we are all impacted, whether we are directly more involved in polluting or not. Jesse?
Thank you. I think, Sophie, I want to hear your sentiments as well. Why should we care? I mean, climate change is real, yes, but when you think about Africa, especially Kenya, where we are currently, people are struggling to just get by. Like what she said, even putting food on the table is hard enough. So when you talk to me about climate change and it's something probably out there, why should the normal person care about climate change?
I think the first thing I'll say is when any greenhouse gas is emitted into the atmosphere, it does not stay where it has been emitted. It moves. Therefore, whether it is emitted in the West or here, the impact will be felt by all of us. Yeah? Thus, as much as we say the developed world is where industrialization has happened, and we've not industrialized and we've not been given the opportunity to industrialize, the fact that the West is continuing to industrialize means we'll continue to be impacted. So we have to worry about what is happening on that side. The other side of the coin is that there's pressure for the developing countries not to industrialize. And I think we felt this. You discover oil, Uganda discovered oil, I think they were told don't exploit it. we are being pressured not to take advantage of the natural resources, and yet the developed world got to the point where they are at because they industrialized and they were actually able to exploit those natural resources. So there's that battle. Yeah, there's that battle of how do we manage the impact of climate change. And the easiest ones, unfortunately, to be pressured is the developing world. When we are told you cannot exploit the natural resources, the pressure is being brought to bear on us by the people who we owe money to. So they're actually able to tell us, you're not allowed to do this. If you do this, this is the impact that you will feel. Now I hear you when we're talking about people who are finding it hard to make ends meet. Yes, we keep talking about the opportunities that are coming around from new technologies, from new industries that are brought about due to the effects of climate change. They're expensive, to be honest. If you look at companies such as ourselves and a lot of other companies that are in this space, yes, they are starting. We just need people to understand what these opportunities are and to find the funding. In some instances, funding is available to be able to set up this so that we stop relying on the traditional ways of actually making money. I'm often surprised when I see instances where people say you can actually plant and grow food without soil. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, I don't remember what it's called, but where you use only water. Is it hydro something? Yes, hydroponics. Yeah. Yet that is a concept that seems very foreign to us because we are very attached to the earth. Yeah? And yet, if you think about it, if we are struggling to feed ourselves, how about we look at these new ways, these new technologies of still getting food on the table, new ways. I know people are earning money through digital means. Again, that is something that has gradually picked up. We just need, from my perspective, I think government needs to be on the same page with private sector so that what private sector is saying and doing is the same thing that government is pushing and also communicating out there.
Thank you. I think most of the push to climate change, especially I will talk about the fueling sector, is really coming from compliance, where you have companies that are either European owned or majority owned, where they are told that you have to comply to this type of metrics. And maybe I'm talking to Susan, who is a GRI expert. Maybe you can tell us what is the role of reporting with regards to helping the industry become greener. And maybe you can first of all talk about GRI, and so that people can be able to understand what it is, and and maybe then you can go into your question.
All right. So, and I guess I should start with the concept of sustainability and bring it down to climate change. So sustainability, ideally, if I were to use the traditional stools that we had, three-legged, is ensuring that as you pursue profit, you're also taking care of the environment and also taking care of the people. And that balance is critical. But we have, as Jessie has said, various voices coming from different perspectives. There's someone who cares more for the environment. There are others who care more for profit, rightfully so, and others are socially driven. And so that conversation, I would say, sustainability conversations began way before. But probably I would say the early 90s in Norway, there was a question of how much more can we continue exploiting resources without taking care of the environment, and the discussions about sustainability began. So GRI, which is Global Reporting Initiative, is an attempt or an initiative to help companies disclose their impacts to, yes, economy, but also the environment and people. And the standards first developed, I think, in 1999, and over time, as SDGs have come on board, they have refined, improved the standards, and so that's where reporting comes into play. And reporting is important because anytime you start to measure something, you're able to see where the gaps are and make a decision about what do you need to do to become better. And the beauty of GRI standards, maybe if contrasted with other standards, is that they are robust. They don't just concentrate on the investor view. They also look at what does the consumer, for example, what would they be interested in? It's very big on stakeholder engagement and ensuring that every person has a say when it comes to the disclosures. So they have 3 main disclosures covering environment, covering economy, and even more covering the social aspect. And so for the fueling industry, adopting that helps us have that balance. And even as Sophie picked up, that we have to consider, yes, taking care of the climate, but also ensuring we are economically empowered. Someone who doesn't have a decent job in their view may not hold the same passion for the environment, and when you say you need to move from one technology to another, and rightfully so. So the beauty of standards and the various ones, whether it's IFRS, it's to bring a balance, that it's not just about profits, yes, but neither is it just about the environment. Yeah.
Thank you. Yesterday we had a long conversation on the transition from dirty petroleum fuels to, of course, EVs. And I know that cocoa has disrupted the market with the bioethanol, and to a large extent has been successful. So what lessons can we learn? Or maybe you can tell us about the journey, because I know there is a lot of, coming from, especially the people you target. Many of them feel like if you cook food with charcoal or with firewood, it tastes better. So what has been your journey? What myths have you had to bust, and what lessons can we learn as an industry from cocoa on how to scale clean energy and also clean cooking?
Thank you, Jesse, for that question. I think the first myth I'll bust is the one that you've just said. The people who honestly say that food tastes better when it's cooked on charcoal are the people who can afford to transition from charcoal. Yeah? Honestly. When you think about someone who's using charcoal or who's cooking with firewood, more often than not, they don't have a choice. Yeah? If you go to the areas that we serve right now, low-income households, they're small rooms, they don't necessarily have ventilation, and this person has to light the jiko inside the house because there's not necessarily space outside to light it. Now tell me you're lighting a charcoal jiko in your house, the smoke is in the house, wouldn't you want a cleaner fuel? If you could afford it, you would take it. And that is the point from which we started. A lot of these people buy daily. They actually buy the charcoal daily, or they buy the kerosene daily, or they go and collect the firewood daily. They really have no choice. Then they come and light it, and what happens? The smoke, they inhale it, their soot covers their house. Suddenly, here comes this brand called cocoa. And what are they giving you? They're giving you a 2-burner cooker at 1950. Yeah? So already, we've subsidized the price of the cook stove, because one of the challenges is the cost of the hardware. So we said, let us subsidize it. What fuel do we give you? We give you bioethanol. Yeah, bioethanol, it's not new, it's just that it is not a mass market. It's not very well known. We use bioethanol, it's renewable, you get it as a byproduct of molasses, so it's something that helps our farmers. Then we subsidize it. Right now we are retailing it at about 88 shillings a litre. 88 shillings a litre, it's cheaper than kerosene, it is way cheaper than charcoal. Tell me why someone would not transition from charcoal. Despite how you may think the food will taste, what a mother wants at the end of the day is to feed her children. She doesn't care that the food tastes a certain way. She needs to make sure that the food is cooked and that children can eat. That was the thought process of us enabling that transition, is what drove our founders. We came into Kenya in 2014, spent 5 years doing R&D. 3 things we knew. One, that we would use carbon markets. I know everybody keeps hearing about carbon markets, but carbon markets done right, they work. And that is, carbon market is what enables us to continuously subsidize both the cook stove and the bioethanol. Second is technology. You cannot do things the old way and expect a change. So we realized you can't bottle. Everybody is bottling and distributing the bioethanol in a bottle. With a bottle, you have to pay for the cost of putting up that factory and the cost of the bottle. We did away with the bottle. So we introduced an ATM, similar to the ATMs you've seen dispensing oil, dispensing milk, dispensing money. We've developed one that dispenses bioethanol, and we install them in shops close to where our customers live. Then we give them a reusable canister. So that canister is what they then use to refuel every day. And they're able to refuel enough to cook for a day, enough to cook whatever amount. The same way they used to buy charcoal is the same way they are buying our bioethanol. We spent those 5 years immersed in our consumer household. So we actually adapted ourselves to how they cook, to how they buy. Those are lessons that others can take. Sometimes you come with something that is so disruptive, it fails because it jolts people so much. You force people to have to move far from what they're used to be able to achieve the same objective. Even for us, we have to make sure that the bioethanol is very close to where the people live, because when they want charcoal, it's literally outside the door. When they want kerosene, it's literally outside the door. So even for us, we had to make sure it's close enough. No one, as much as they want our clean cooking fuel, will walk a kilometer to look for our fuel. We had to make sure that we adapt. That's a lesson that can be picked up by this industry. We have partnered with Vivo, who market through the Shell branded petrol station, so they're helping us along the value chain. They are looking at our solution and they're asking themselves, what lessons can we take from cocoa that can be applied downstream, yeah, in terms of how the fuel is dispensed to motorists, etc. So there are lessons that can be learned around the 5-year journey, and the fact that sooner or later, the transition has to happen. Bioethanol is used extensively in the US and in Brazil, where it's produced in large quantities, where they blend with petrol and diesel. I know the president pronounced himself a while back that the government is meant to develop the regulations around that within 90 days. So it's a viable option. We will not necessarily move straight from using petrol and diesel to EV. I don't think you can make such a huge jump. There has to be a transition. And for us, that is a transition. So that is an area where we in the clean cooking sector can partner with players within the fuel industry and start thinking about blending. Because when we think about fuel blending, then we are talking about larger volumes of bioethanol. And larger volumes for bioethanol will benefit us because now we will encourage local production of bioethanol, and local production will mean that the prices are lower, which will enable us even further reduce our price and increase our penetration. Thank you.
Wow, that was a lot to unpack. But I think there is no way you can have a sustainability conversation or climate change conversation without talking about carbon. And you've actually mentioned carbon. So I know there are very many people who probably don't understand how the carbon markets work, how carbon credits are generated. I don't know whether you want to say anything about carbon credits.
So speaking now from the clean cooking sector, not so much the nature-based, you generate a carbon credit when a household transitions from using charcoal to using clean fuel and then consistently using. The carbon credit is not generated beforehand. Yeah? The transition has to actually happen. And then once our customer has actually bought our cook stove and then they start buying the fuel, what happens is an auditor is sent into the country where they sample a number of households, visit them, and confirm that they actually see the cook stove, and they confirm that you're actually using the fuel. Once that is verified, those then become carbon credits that you can actually sell. So it's not actually something tangible. You can't actually see it, but there is a record. It's an asset that is available virtually. Once you have it. So let's say, for us, let's say we generate about 5 carbon credits per household per year. And then we've reached about 1.3 million households. So every year you can see the numbers that we're generating. Once you have them, you now need to sell them because you need to monetize them. Yeah? Before we monetize, someone has to enable the household to transition. Yeah? For them to transition, our solution has to be affordable. The only way that solution will be affordable is if someone fronts us the carbon finance to be able to subsidize the cook stove and the fuel. So someone has to give us money beforehand, yeah, so that they actually transition and continue using, so that once we actually have the verified carbon credits, we then monetize them, the first person we are paying back is the person who lent us money. Yeah? I hope that makes sense. Now, when you're talking about selling, this is where developing countries have the edge, because we are able to generate, to have sectors that can actually generate carbon credits for these entities that we are talking about that are too heavily industrialized, and they're not able to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions below a certain level. And if a threshold has been set, yeah, and they're not able to meet it, that is why they're then required. Laws are put in place. They're required to comply with those laws, that if you're not able to reduce the gap that you have to fulfill it by buying carbon credits from someone else. So those are the companies that we look for, either companies or sometimes it's country-to-country trades. So we look at such companies, like right now the hot one is airlines. We know airlines emit a lot of greenhouse gases. So airlines are required, right now they're actually required to buy carbon credits. So they will then come, approach Cocoa, we will have a discussion, and then we agree based on our cost of production of our carbon credits and the impact that we're having in the market, what price are they willing to pay. Once they pay, then as I said, we pay the person who financed us before, and then we are then able to pay, there are certain fees that we are meant to pay to the government. There's a $4 fee if you want government to allow you to export those carbon credits. So after you've paid for the person who funded you, you're then able to generate revenue. And this revenue then flows down and enables KRA to be able to collect from us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that masterclass on carbon. Yeah, so I know, Susan, you're an expert in supply. And I know, maybe I would want you to give a state of where we are in terms of supply with regards to sustainability, and maybe your views or your opinion on how we can be able to create a more sustainable procurement and distribution of petroleum products in this country.
Thank you, Jesse. So when I look at where we are as an industry, the supply chain, and especially upstream meaning, okay, let me call it midstream for the people in the room who may confuse what I mean by upstream, is interlinked from marketer to marketer. And what we are seeing, when we look at what can government do, what can we do as a sector to be more sustainable, the two main areas that we can make an impact are on mobility and clean cooking, as Sophie said. So there are solutions that are over and above what she's talked about, biofuels, and it's an area any marketer you ask today is either in it or thinking about it within the next 1 year. As a diversification, maybe Cocoa are specializing in that, but you'll find a lot of the marketers, a lot of those who are in traditional fossil fuels, diversifying to include part of their portfolio, the other alternative fuels. And so when it comes to clean cooking, I believe that's where we are seeing, as PS Liban talked about yesterday, putting up infrastructure to ensure that we can source cheaper product. That's important. As Sophie also said, the cost of products is what determines whether the end user is willing to make that switch. And what government and the industry is looking at is operationalizing the LPG open tender system so that we can all get LPG at a cheaper rate. That should translate to the cost per your mtungi in the house, your bottled gas. And so both at sourcing and ensuring there is infrastructure. For the private players, there has been the push to let's increase our capacity to receive a vessel now that we will be sourcing at a go, maybe a vessel a month. You also don't want to increase prices by staying out because we don't have infrastructure. So again, there was the talk of there is a private facility in Kilifi, 10 KT to be able to receive. These private facilities are now becoming common user facility. it is better use of capital to ensure that we're using the capacity we have optimally. And beyond clean cooking, the area of mobility, making sure, because energy and transport are joined at the hip, you can't address mobility without addressing the source of energy. And so for many marketers, there is the inclusion of charging, EV charging at stations, just to ensure, and this has been said even by speakers ahead of us, but those are the two main ways in which the industry is taking care of climate change in terms of operations. So ensuring the offering, but as well as our own operations, moving to cleaner energy, whether it is solar panels at stations, at depots, at our installations, the offices. Every reduction matters. And the responsibility for a cleaner country falls, yes, to the individual, to organizations, and to government. And whatever one can do to make sure we are either reversing the effects by reducing how much we were using when it comes to unsustainable energy, it all adds up.
Thank you, thank you. Sophie, you talked about partnerships. You said you have a partnership with Vivo. And I mean, given your success, are you looking to partner with more oil marketing companies? Are you looking to source more bioethanol from Kenya instead of importing? Are you looking to be involved in helping transition Kenya to start blending bioethanol with diesel and petrol, because you are an expert already in that particular field? How is Cocoa looking to spread the pie, or is it the goodies?
Very interesting question, Jesse. And Jogu has asked me that question before. So when you actually think about when we started off, when we came here in 2014, when we have 4 co-founders, they set up Cocoa in a house, just like a lot of typical startups. When they were pitching their idea, when it was still an idea, and you'd go and demonstrate some cobbled up something that reflects your vision. It was quite a hard sell, honestly. It took a while before we got to the point where we had supporters and we had people who are willing to walk the journey with us. So to be honest, by the time we actually signed the partnership with Vivo, we had reached out to other entities. Unfortunately, not too many people were able to see the vision. The way Cocoa portrayed it and said, we will be able to come and solve for dirty cooking. When we pitched ATM, people are like, what have you been smoking? What have you been drinking? What is this? This will not work. There are a lot of naysayers. So to be honest, by the time Vivo came to the table, we then negotiated an exclusive agreement, because you need to honor the fact that this person worked with you when no one else was willing to work with you. As we grew, and I keep saying this, even in the early stages when we would work and we are seeking to talk to government, we struggled to get onto the table, because as long as you're not big enough, sometimes it's very difficult to go and actually have a conversation face to face with government. It took us really growing and getting to the point where we took off, and this was just during COVID, where we took off and we eventually grew to the point where we were adding 10,000 households a week. And it was actually growing that fast. Demand was faster ahead of supply. Then we started hitting our milestones, 250,000 households, 500,000 households. Government now came knocking. That's when, as I said, KRA now suddenly looks up and asks, who's this? So yes, government then started paying attention. So now we work very closely with government, with the Ministry of Energy. When we're having the conversation around blending, we are called to the table, because you can't talk about bioethanol without us, who are the largest off-taker. So that's one side. Those are two, on the Vivo side and on the government side. The last one is around now production of bioethanol. In the early stages, the company that was producing large quantities of bioethanol was Mumias. So we reached out to Mumias, we pitched to them. This is where we are looking towards, how about we partner, you increase your capacity so that as we grow, you're also growing with us. As you'd expect, they didn't really see that pathway to increased volumes. And unfortunately, in such a situation, you have no choice. You have to look for ethanol elsewhere. So we actually had to import. As happens in a lot of sectors, you actually have to look for alternatives before the local industry grows. So we started importing, and the more we imported, the more local producers now came to us and said, okay, now we see what you are talking about. How about you invite us to the table? The thing with us is we are keen to support domestic because it makes sense for us to buy local ethanol. As much as international bioethanol in the commodity market is cheaper, we want to buy local. We want to support our own farmers. We want to support the millers to be able to actually produce more. So we've actually signed an offtake agreement with one sugar miller, and that way we've guaranteed that we'll offtake their bioethanol, and using that, they went and got funding to increase the output of their distillery. We have 3 more that have come to us, expressed their same interest, all using sugar. We have a 4th one who's setting up a cassava plant in the coast where she will be producing bioethanol from cassava. And she's achieved that behind from an offtake agreement or at least a letter of support that we shared with her. So for us, as much as we call ourselves a Kenyan company, as much as our founders are not Kenyan, we were formed in Kenya. We're taking our solution and we are taking it international. We want to make sure that Kenya shines. It's very much like the M-Pesa story. When people think about M-Pesa, you think about Kenya. You don't think about where it's gone. The same thing for us with cocoa. It's not only a solution that makes sense for Kenya. It actually makes sense for any country where they are struggling with charcoal and firewood as the leading cause of deforestation.
Thank you. As a follow-up question, and I think this is open to both of you, and you bring a very interesting perspective to this, and I'll tie it to something which in the sustainability circles is called green colonialism, where where you have where all the benefits are taken away, and you remain where you are, or even a worse situation. So how do we create or design systems, or is it organizations, or where the benefit remains, the benefit is fair and remains local to a large extent? Because when you think about carbon, ultimately still benefits, the more developed countries. Yes, we do get the money, but when you imagine that the financing is coming from outside, the verifiers are coming from outside, the buyers who are greenwashing are also coming from outside. The whole thing is a bit skewed. When you think about reporting as well, and we did mention that, our companies are still very nascent. Our industries are very nascent. When you subject to them the same reporting standards as companies that are mature and have been there for hundreds of years, it's really not fair. So maybe this is open to you. I want to hear your sentiments. Open to you, Susan. Maybe you can give it a shot, and then Sophie can conclude that question.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse. That one, it is a dicey question, but all the same, we'll take it. Green colonialism, I think is real. It is something that all of us need to be cautious about, in as much as we push for sustainability and there is a case for it, how it happens, how that journey looks like for us in the global south can result to green colonialism, and that's a real concern. And from where I sit, everybody has to be concerned, get as much knowledge as you can at a personal level for your company that you work for or that you run, so that you're able, and I'm happy that Convener Njogu, you have put up this, for us to exchange ideas, to share ideas, and to also come together as Kenyans to see what do we need to edit from what the script that is coming from the global north. The way their transition looks like can't be the same with ours. We are looking at our population growing. Do not have the level of infrastructure that they have. And so if our journeys look the same, there's someone who's being cheated, and it would be us. So having these conversations helps us be on the table to decide what really should we be doing. And the importance of reporting and using standards. In my opinion, it doesn't disadvantage you whether you're a big or a small company by using a standard. The question is, what should the target be? But having that standard to just tell you where are you, anybody can do that. Any small, big company, for example, with GRI, you can use it. The targets you set for yourselves are what differentiates, and you will look at your performance based on the targets that you set. And so one of the ways to cushion ourselves from that, even when it comes to carbon credit, the market, is to ask ourselves what would be the opportunity costs of that level of compliance, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, noting that for us, our population in 10 years, in 20 years will look very different, and ensuring that we can continue to have discussions, even with government, and especially with government, our regulators, policy makers, make that noise enough to ensure that we are all part of the table. And reporting, one of the good things that you get to see is you are expected to disclose, you have made this much money. How have you spent the money? It's not just how much profit have you made, but where have you spent the money? Is it the local communities, indigenous people? Have you expatriated all the money abroad? Your suppliers, what's their percentage, local versus imported? So these standards, in my opinion, used rightfully, give us a chance, and a fair chance, to make sure we subject all companies, both local and global, to a level of transparency, even if they are operating here. And the more we are educated on, even whether it's the carbon markets, where you have more professionals in the sector, and Jesse, for you, I'm sure you're an expert when it comes to carbon markets, you are getting a lower rate for not, for what we are doing in Africa. They get a higher rate for removal. Is that correct? Should we be fighting for even much more because of the opportunity losses, resources? And having that balance will help us know, are we willing to comply 100%? Will we say no? It is also our right to exploit our resources. They will add to carbon, but we will use other technologies to remove that carbon from the climate or from the space. Those are decisions you can make only if you're informed and if you are using all the tools available, whether it is reporting, whether it is ratings, to help us make that decision at government level, at industry level for organizations, and even as advocates of sustainability. Yeah.
I'll just pick up 3 points. I'll just speak about 3 points. One is government has understood exactly that problem, and that is why the Climate Change Act was amended in September 2023, and then they put in place carbon market regulations which regulate what we as project developers are allowed to do. And honestly, if you go through them, they are very, very protective of the community, of the citizens. There is push for us to see value. So it's very difficult for projects that are seeking to exploit resources without benefiting the local communities. They'll find it very hard to operate. That is one. Two is, as much as, yes, the auditors, the verifiers, all the verification bodies, most of them are based out of the country. It's just because we are late in catching up to carbon markets. Honestly, carbon markets have been around for over 25 years. So, and you think about it, a lot of that business was happening in the north. It was not, we were not involved necessarily here in the south. So we are playing catch up. The one thing I can say is there is an express focus to develop local auditors, to develop locals. Yeah, so that because when you think about having to bring an auditor to audit your project, you have to pay for them to fly in. So there are entities that are being very intentional about developing local talent. Third one, I'll say, and we've had this a lot of times, the internet is your friend. There is no shortage of courses that can walk you through what carbon markets are, what it takes for you to get a certification, to become an auditor, to become a verifier. It's not something that you have to wait until the course is offered in in a university. Because right now, I think there are only 2 universities, University of Nairobi that is offering a degree on environment, I think, and climate change, and Strathmore University. And a lot of them will require, I mean, they do require some heavy resources. Make use of the internet, get yourself to a certain extent there, then as you reach out to the entities that are seeking to increase the capacity, they can take you the last mile to become qualified. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've actually alluded to my last question, which basically is to, you know, I know you have a lot of students here and young professionals who want to get involved in the, I think right now it's a $1 trillion business, or is it economic opportunity that is carbon credit, and many people want to get involved, but unfortunately, by the time they joined school or they left school, those courses were not available. I think what I have seen as a quote-unquote carbon professional is how much, you know, every day, every week, every month, the carbon information, you know, I would say the information available, the kind of regulations that are being put out across the world is changing. So the question is, what would you advise a professional who hasn't been to the University of Nairobi or Strathmore to do the climate change degree? And I think even by the time they are done with that degree, it's going to be obsolete, unfortunately. What would you advise the young professionals and students to do to be able to join the table, or at least participate in this big opportunity that is unfolding, you know, right in front of our eyes, and you know, many of the people are just watching because they don't know how to be able to participate. Yes. Yeah.
I'll go first. What I'll say is, recently, I think over the past 4 or 5 weeks, Vast Carbon have been running a weekly 1.5 to 2 hour course, walking people through carbon markets. And it's available on YouTube. You can actually access it, and they teach you like someone who's starting from zero.
Let me just confirm. VERST is VERST.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's important.
Yes.
VERST, carbon.
Yes. If you look for, you'll find they have, I mean, the recordings are available. You can reach out to them. I think they started advertising on LinkedIn. You can actually reach out to them. And they're not the only ones. Yeah? Gold Standard has done the same thing. Yeah, because they now understand that if you do not disseminate this information, you're talking to a very small majority. And as you're saying, this $1 trillion market, this opportunity will pass a lot of people by. To be honest, the cost of just setting up a carbon project, people keep saying, I have my 200 trees, I have my trees, or I have planted on my 1 acre farm, can I convert that into a carbon project? Unfortunately, no. And part of that is you understanding what are the requirements for you to set up a carbon project. What steps do you have to go through? You actually have to have upfront capital. You need to pay for people to actually come and certify that what you're doing actually qualifies to be a carbon project. So just that understanding, for me, is a starting point. Make the internet your friend. Secondly, I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to use LinkedIn. Yeah? You can find subject matter experts. Yeah, when you identify people who are players within that space, follow them, look at who are they following. It will lead you to down trails where people are able to showcase what is happening, people who are always announcing when forums are coming up, workshops are coming up. You have to mine the media that the people who are in this space are utilizing. And a lot of them are on media that the young people are not on. We're not necessarily speaking the same language. Gen Zs are playing in social media that us, the old people, are not necessarily playing. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm sure a lot of the young people you're referencing will not necessarily be playing on LinkedIn. But if you want to go where the money is, you have to follow where the money is being generated. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know if she referred to us as old people, but I take it. But really, I would just echo her words. Make the internet your friend. There is a lot that is available, not just for carbon trading, but for the sustainability space as a whole. Even for I to integrate, while I work as a supply trading professional in National Oil, sustainability is my own personal journey. Just by making sure I use my evenings, Going on to sites like UN, CCLAN, they have so much that you get, and you get even certification. Sometimes when you have a small assignment to finish, you actually feel you've invested enough, and it helps you grow in that journey. And as she also said, putting yourself in the spaces where the discussions are happening, not everything may be found online, but investing a bit of time and a little shilling here and there to be in such spaces. Truly, I want to congratulate the students who have made time to be with us. And you never know. We were once students like you, exposing ourselves to some of these areas, so all the best. But I think the easiest thing before we say spend money going to a university in the UK or the US to learn about it is really to begin with the internet. There is so much, you can't exhaust it. Yeah, best wishes.
Thank you, thank you. I think it's a time we can clap for our panelists. And then we can take any questions that are there.
So my name is Ashton. I have 2 questions that I would like to ask you. So yesterday we had a panel, and we were being told that there have been national blackouts in Spain and Greece because of the over-reliance on the renewable energy. So from where you stand, where do we draw the line between sustainability and climate change, or caring for the climate change? Then my next question would be, we have learned that LPG, biofuels, and EV are extremely cheaper, or comparatively cheaper, compared to the fossil fuels, that is the hydrocarbons, and they're more effective in conserving our climate, but it seems that they are less popular in Kenya and in the continent. So what can be done to increase their popularity? Are there government policies or subsidies that can be implemented to make them more popular in the country and in the continent? Thank you.
Thank you, Ashton, for those 2 very good questions. And as you rightfully said, from the energy side, generation, reliance on solar and wind, while they are cleaner, there is what I believe it's Ken Mugambi was talking about, base load. There is a certain threshold that you need to maintain the grid at any one time, regardless of the consumption. And we would say it is better to have a diversified source of energies than really being completely reliant on just one. The renewables, it's just about the instability. When you look at wind, it changes. It's not like burning diesel or fuel oil. Or when it comes to solar, and you can understand the instability when it becomes the only source you have to support like a whole economy. So the question is, how can you ensure that you have enough thermal to use to serve people? Because the power, it's, again, remember the 3-legged stool. There is a reason you need that energy, but you make sure that how you do it does not compromise the businesses that are running. And of course, Jesse, you can add on to this after. And to your second question on what is government doing when it comes to LPG, or what the industry is doing when it comes to LPG, bio and EV, they are cheaper. So they can be cheaper, but she talked about barrier to entry being how much it costs, the upfront costs relating to getting a cylinder for someone who is transitioning, someone who is having to make a daily decision about what they buy. They buy food on a daily basis. To tell them to invest in a cylinder to cook for 2 months, it feels like that is just too big a spend. So sometimes back, before COVID, government started thinking about how to help that market of millions of households transition, One, by subsidizing the cylinder. And National Oil, some of you may remember, had the Mwananchi gas project. And the pilot happened. What we realized is that it is not just the cost of the cylinder, it is also the refill cost after, because you're refilling maybe after a month and a half, it is still a lot more than they can because of the buying patterns. And so the push to have LPG OTS is supposed to address that for a long term than having, yes, the initial cylinder, that person uses, it's finished, it's another metal in their house. So the LPG OTS, open tender system, will help the marketers who now sell bottled gas alongside even the resellers get that price landed at Mombasa at a better price than what is already happening. That is one, dealing with sourcing. The other part is what PS also talked about. The LPG growth strategy has aspects that will deal with households. You will see that subsidy being pushed, as well as making sure as many people, if you convert institutions, for example, there is a way what happens at the younger generation affects what happens at the homes. So if my school is no longer using charcoal and firewood, we have transitioned to LPG, even as a culture, we'll pick up, okay, there is a lot of talk about, oh, let's move to cleaner energy as we go. So we will see all those policies and the strategies being implemented to address the cost aspect. For me, I would say when it comes to LPG, that has been a big hindrance. That is not just about the initial purchase, it also includes the after refills. You want to talk about the EVs and biofuels, I believe?
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money. I think the question is just having a good energy source matrix, just so that you are not over reliant on one. And especially the biggest challenges we have right now for solar is battery storage. So you can imagine powering the whole country. You probably having storage is not the brightest idea. Wind, as she said, is quite intermittent, but there are many other sources of power. There is nuclear, there is of course the dirtiest, which is coal, there is natural gas, there is hydropower, there is geothermal. So there are very many sources of power, but I think it's having a policy that creates a good energy matrix so that you never have to be exposed because one is not working. We've seen these challenges across the world. I mean, if you remember recently, we've had a lot of challenges with power I think they're still in South Africa because of their over-reliance on coal. And we've also had challenges, especially with the countries that were relying on nuclear. And after the big accident that happened in Japan, they had to retire some nuclear power stations. And then they got exposed and they did not have enough power to power their nation. So I would say it's a policy issue, but I think the discussion you're having with the tech guys is that you have to transition gradually. You can't suddenly switch off all your dirty fuel and go renewable 100%. We are not there yet as a world. Yeah, thank you. Any other question? I guess that's it then. Any question? I know you guys have been coming here every day. Yeah. So yeah. Maybe pass the mic. And we have another question at the back. We can take the two of them and then we can close.
Hello, my name is Lauren Maganga, finalist student of Gas and Petroleum Engineering at KU. And mine is a very simple question. What would you tell a younger you? Yeah. Thank you.
I think you can take that.
Good afternoon. My name is Florence Agunda. Mine is just on Sophie. You've talked of cocoa, but the availability of cocoa is very low. You can look for cocoa for, days and days. Sometimes they tell you it's not in the depot. They will supply and all that. Maybe if you can make it a little bit available in case somebody wants. Because sometimes if you're used to it, then now you have to now look for another alternative. So maybe that's just a plea or a request. And also, I know it's like most of the time you're dealing mostly with the slum areas only. You are not, you don't bring them to these other households. Or, yeah, most of them, I know, it's like for mine, I always have to go and get it in Kibera, but I'm on this other side. So maybe you can also consider, it's not that it can only be used by the locals. Yeah, maybe it's, or is it me? Okay, me, I live this side of Kilimani, but I always have to go and get mine in Kibera. And sometimes availability becomes an issue.
Thank you. I think I'll start with yours because it's so simple. Our solution is 100% low income. 100%. Or 99%. As Njogu said, he's also a user. I'm also a user. I'm here with Humphrey, my colleague. I'm sure he's also a user. But when you think about how carbon markets operate, we need to actually be enabling people transition, stop using charcoal and stop using firewood. That is why we have to pitch camp where people are using it. There will be a gray area where we overlap with LPG, as Susan said, but our ambition is not to go and fight with LPG where you live. If I come and set up in Kilimani, what do you think will happen? Susan will come knocking at my door. Not literally, but yeah, the way the government has structured it, LPG in the transition to universal access, in our ambition for universal access by 2030, LPG will contribute 50%, ethanol will contribute 30%. That is why we are all looking for innovative ways to reach the rural areas, because the issue is not so much in the urban areas, it's in the rural areas. So for as long as you continue living in Kilimani, you will have to keep walking to Kibera. Okay? What would I say to a young Ami? Today I was just reading the article of this gentleman who was just appointed the Vice Chancellor of Corporate University of Kenya, and I think he's 36. And he referenced what his grandparents told him to get mentors. Yeah? I would tell a younger me to get mentors earlier. I started getting mentors when I started working, when I started getting into spaces, the way we were talking about getting into spaces where people are. I would have started getting people who I'm looking up to when I was in high school. Yeah? So that way you have people who are guiding you, who are hand-holding you, so that you're able to make better decisions. If I look back, obviously there are things I would change. I can't change, but for the one thing I keep doing and I push hard is I'm a mentor. I mentor a lot of people at work, outside of work, because nobody will get to another stage or move or progress in your career in life without other people pulling you up or extending a helping hand to you. Thank you.
What to say to my younger self? It's funny, I actually wrote what she has said here, that bear your yoke early. Invest in yourself earlier, and it's something Sophie has said. Sometimes we want to take a bit of time, enjoy life just because university is ended. So much is moving so fast. You have to look at yourself competing not with Kenya, but the world. And for you to take advantage, and especially as a lady, it is better to do things early. She's talked about mentorship. I would say find, and mentorship involves people, but it also involves information. You can self-mentor by ensuring you're getting information, investing in yourself, but as early as you can. And best wishes and congratulations.
I guess that wraps it up for this evening. Is it evening or is it afternoon? I think we'll take a picture and then we'll hand over to Mr. MC. So kindly help me do a round of applause to our panelists.